My siblings always looked down on me. They banned me from all their weddings. So I didn't invite them to mine, and what happened after left them speechless. My name is Emily. I'm the youngest of 5. Mike, Chris, Rachel, and Josh. They were all so much older than me. It felt like I'd been born into the wrong family. By the time I was forming memories, they were already leaving, moving out, going to college, starting careers, getting married. I wasn't the baby sister. I was the leftover, the tag-along. Still, I loved them. When you're the youngest, you look up to your siblings like they're stars in the sky. Unreachable, bright, perfect. I thought Mike hung the moon. He was the cool oldest brother, the one everyone listened to. Chris was quiet and serious, but I still adored him. Rachel was the big sister I dreamed of being close to, the one I wanted to mirror. And Josh, the youngest of the older 4, felt closest in age to me, but even he always kept his distance. The first time I realized I wasn't part of their world was Mike's wedding. I was 10. 10 is that awkward age, too old to be coddled, too young to be included. I felt ready to be part of something special. I even asked my mom if I could wear one of her necklaces for the big day. She sat me down gently. Mike and Sarah are having an adults-only wedding, sweetie. You won't be able to go. I blinked. But I'm not like a little kid, I said. I won't cause trouble. I'll sit quietly. I promise. She smiled, patted my head like I was a dog, and said, "It's just for adults, Emily. You'll understand when you're older." I didn't understand. At all. I cried in my room for hours that day. I wanted to see my brother get married. I wanted to watch Sarah, who already felt like a sister to me, walk down the aisle. But instead, I stayed home with a babysitter, staring at the clock, imagining every moment I was missing. When Mike came back from his honeymoon, I thought maybe he'd say something, a joke, a story, a little, "Sorry you couldn't be there, kiddo." Nothing. He never brought it up. It was like I didn't exist. 2 years later, Chris got engaged. I was 12 then, and I thought, this time will be different. I was older, more mature. I didn't whine or cause a fuss. I made sure everyone noticed how grown up I was acting. But then the announcement came, child-free wedding. Again, same explanation. It's not personal, Emily, but it felt personal. Twice in a row, 2 brothers, 2 weddings, and not once did they stop to say, "Hey, maybe our sister should be there." This time, I didn't cry. I was 12 now. I tried to act more mature. I didn't beg. I didn't scream. I just sat there while my parents made their excuses. "You'll have your own wedding someday, and it'll be wonderful," my mom said. But it didn't help, because deep down, I was realizing something awful. My siblings didn't see me as family, not the way I saw them. When Rachel got engaged, I was 15, and for a moment, just a brief flicker, I thought maybe she'd be different. At first, she didn't plan on banning kids. She wanted everyone to come, but then the extended family got involved. The aunts, uncles, the chorus of adult voices saying things like, "It's so refreshing to have a wedding without kids running wild. Children just make everything chaotic." Eventually, Rachel caved. The rule became, no one under 16. I was 15. 15, so close that it felt like a punch to the chest. I went to Rachel directly. "Can I just be the exception? I'm your sister. I'll be quiet, I promise." She looked at me, serious and detached. "If I make an exception for you, I'd have to make it for the other kids. It wouldn't be fair." "Fair? Are you kidding me?" I snapped. "It's not fair that I haven't been to a single one of your weddings. I'm not just some kid. I'm your sister." The blowback was instant. My parents stormed in, said I was disrespecting Rachel, that I was causing drama. They grounded me for 6 months. 6 months. I spent that time in my room, not just grounded, but wounded, angry, humiliated, forgotten. By the time Josh got engaged, I was 17. I didn't even ask. I didn't wait for the announcement. I knew what was coming, and sure enough, it arrived. Child-free wedding. This time, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't even flinch. I'd gone numb. But the part that really stung, my cousin Amanda, who had just turned 18, was invited. She got to go because she'd crossed the magical arbitrary line that made her adult enough. Amanda was 3 months older than me. When my parents asked why I didn't congratulate Josh more enthusiastically, I just shrugged. I texted him a dry, "Congrats, hope it's a great day," and locked myself in my room. That was when I stopped trying. I stopped hoping for a place at their tables. I stopped believing that I'd ever matter to them the way they mattered to me. They didn't see me as a sister. I was a kid they tolerated, a background character in their stories. And it hurt. It really hurt. Years passed, and with every wedding that came and went, something inside me closed. By the time I met Tyler, my now fiancé, I was emotionally checked out of the whole family thing. I didn't expect love from them anymore. I didn't expect inclusion. I expected silence. Tyler was the first person who truly listened when I told the story. I remember sitting on his couch, curled up in a blanket, telling him how I'd been banned from 4 of my siblings' weddings. He stared at me in disbelief. Wait, they didn't invite you? Not even when you were, 15? Nope, I said, pretending it didn't sting anymore. He shook his head. That's seriously messed up. You're their sister. That was the moment it hit me. Really hit me. It was messed up. For so long, I'd normalized it. Told myself child-free weddings were logical, that I wasn't being targeted, that it was just the way things were, but it wasn't. 4 times, I was excluded. Not once did any of them say, Emily should be there. Emily matters. That wasn't normal. That was abandonment in slow motion. So, when Tyler and I got engaged a few years later, I already knew. My wedding was going to be different. It would be full of people who wanted to be there, people who loved me, people who had shown up for me when it counted. And my siblings? They weren't invited. I didn't make a dramatic announcement. I didn't send a message or drop a bomb in the group chat. I just left them off the guest list. Simple, intentional, and, for once, completely on my terms. I knew it would explode eventually, but for the first time in my life, I was ready for it. At first, there was silence. I sent out the invitations like any other bride, handwritten envelopes, thoughtfully chosen. Tyler and I spent hours picking just the right font, the right shade of paper, the perfect balance of elegance and personality. We were proud of that guest list. Friends, cousins, a few aunts and uncles, people who had been present in our lives, who showed up not just for the milestones, but for the messy middle parts too. But not Mike, not Chris, not Rachel, not Josh, not even my parents. Some people gasped when they realized that. You're not inviting your parents? Not even your siblings? And every time, I said the same thing. They weren't there for me. I'm not giving them front row seats to a life they ignored. I expected backlash, but I underestimated how fast it would come. 2 days after the invitations went out, Rachel called me. I stared at the screen for a second, her name glowing like a warning sign. I answered, quietly. Hello? She didn't waste a second. What the hell is this, Emily? I just talked to Amanda. She got an invite to your wedding. So did Aunt Lisa. But we didn't? What's going on? I kept my voice even. Exactly what it looks like. You're seriously excluding your own family? She snapped. Do you have any idea how hurtful that is? That question cracked something open in me. Hurtful, I repeated, stunned. You're asking me that? Don't turn this around, Rachel said, her tone sharpening. This is petty. It's vindictive. And there it was. I took a deep breath. Rachel, I was banned from your wedding, and Mike's, and Chris's, and Josh's. Not once was I invited. Not once did anyone speak up for me. Not one of you said, hey, maybe our sister deserves to be there. She scoffed. That was years ago. We were just doing what made sense at the time. It wasn't personal. It was personal to me, I said. I sat home, 4 times, while all of you built memories without me, and no one cared. There was a pause. I could hear her breathing hard, pacing maybe. You're acting like a victim, she said coldly. You're punishing us for something we didn't even mean to do. That's when I lost my patience. I'm not punishing you, I snapped. I'm just not pretending anymore. I'm not going to let people who never showed up for me play dress up at my wedding and pretend we're some close-knit family. She hung up. No goodbye, no apology, just click. 2 hours later, Mike called. His voice was smug, condescending. So, I hear there's a wedding happening, and none of us are invited? I didn't answer. Seriously, Emily, he said, chuckling like I was being ridiculous. Are you trying to make some kind of statement? I stayed quiet for a beat. I'm just doing what feels right. Cut the crap, he said. You're throwing a tantrum because you didn't get to go to some weddings when you were a kid. Let it go. My hands started shaking. I wasn't a kid, I said through clenched teeth. I was 15, 17. You all acted like I didn't matter. And now you want to act shocked that I've moved on? It's just a wedding, he said dismissively. You're making it bigger than it is. That's rich, I snapped. When I begged to go to your wedding, you all acted like it was the most sacred, exclusive event of the decade. But now that you're left out, suddenly it's just a party. He didn't respond to that. Eventually he muttered, This is low, Emily, even for you. And then he hung up too. Next came the texts. Chris sent a 3-paragraph essay about family values and setting an example. He said I was creating division, that weddings were a time for healing, not grudge holding. I replied with 1 sentence. Where was that energy when you left me off the guest list at 12 years old? He didn't answer. Josh's message was more emotional, guilt-laced, manipulative. I didn't think it mattered that much. I was young. We all were. I'm sorry you felt left out, but this seems extreme. Felt left out. Not was left out. Not excluded. Just some vague, soft version that put the blame on me for being sensitive. I didn't respond to him at all. Then my mom called. That one was hard. I let it ring twice before answering. Her voice was already tight with emotion. Emily, what's going on? I just got off the phone with Rachel. She's devastated. I swallowed. I'm sure she is. You didn't invite your own siblings, your own parents. How could you? You let them ban me from 4 weddings, I said quietly. You stood by and did nothing. Those were child-free weddings, she said, like reading from a script. It wasn't about you. It was always about me, I said, the words sharper now. Because I was the only one left out, every time, and you didn't fight for me once. You were too young. Amanda was 3 months older than me, and she got to go to Rachel's wedding, I snapped. Don't pretend this was about age. It was about convenience. There was silence on the line, then a quiet sniffle. You're tearing this family apart, she whispered. And that was it. That line, that exact sentence. I felt my stomach twist and then harden into steel. No, I said slowly. I'm just refusing to pretend we were ever whole. I hung up. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding. But I felt light. For once, I wasn't swallowing my pain. I was handing it back, letting them feel the weight they had always placed on me. Tyler came home from work that night and found me sitting on the couch staring at the wall. You okay? He asked gently. I looked at him, at the only person who'd ever made me feel seen, truly seen, and I nodded. Yeah, I said. I think I finally am, because sometimes healing doesn't come from closure. It comes from standing up, finally, and saying, you don't get to hurt me and still claim a seat at my table. The day of my wedding dawned with soft light pouring through the windows. It was quiet, not the chaotic kind of quiet that buzzes with tension, but a calm, settled stillness, peaceful. I woke up in a cabin on the edge of a lake, tucked away in the woods, surrounded by the people who actually loved me. There were no buzzing phones, no last-minute crises, no dramatic relatives demanding attention or asking why they hadn't been invited. Just warmth, laughter. Tyler's mom was there, helping with breakfast. My best friend Jade was doing her terrible imitation of a hairstylist, teasing my curls and yelling, "Girl, you better tip me in champagne or I'm leaving you bald." We all laughed so hard I almost cried, not because she was funny, but because this felt like what family was supposed to be, comfortable, easy, real. I glanced at my reflection in the mirror, half-done makeup, hair pinned up with trial and error, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to fake anything. I looked like myself. I was myself. My dress was simple, elegant lace, nothing over the top. I'd chosen it not for the drama or photos, but because it felt like home, like me, like a version of myself I wanted Tyler to see when I walked down that aisle. Honest, open, unfiltered. We got married in a small garden on the property. The path was lined with wildflowers. We didn't need a cathedral or a ballroom. We just needed that little circle of trees, the sky above, and each other. When I stepped into view, Tyler cried, full on, tears down his cheeks, eyes locked on me, kind of crying. The good kind. The kind that tells you you're finally exactly where you were always meant to be. Jade squeezed my hand before I took that first step. Look at you, she whispered. Unbreakable. I took slow, steady breaths as I walked toward him, and with each step, I felt something peel away. A memory, a scar, a whisper of old pain. Step. I'm not the forgotten little sister anymore. Step. I'm not begging to be included. Step. I'm not waiting for someone to say I matter. I already do. When I reached him, Tyler took my hands and the whole world faded away. His vows weren't flowery or poetic. They were honest. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, he said. You don't have to earn love. You already deserve it, every bit of it. And I believed him, because for the first time, someone had chosen me, without hesitation, without condition. The ceremony was short, intimate, sacred, the kind of moment you wish you could bottle and carry around for the rest of your life. Not perfect, but whole. After the vows, we walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, hand in hand, surrounded by laughter and applause that meant something. The reception was filled with people who had held me through my worst nights, people who knew what I'd come from, who had watched me slowly rebuild a sense of self after being invisible for so long. We didn't have a big fancy venue. We had a bonfire, a barbecue, homemade pie instead of a wedding cake, and joy. God, so much joy. There was dancing, not choreographed, not elegant, just wild and free. The kind of dancing where shoes come off and makeup gets smudged and no one gives a damn because you're too happy to care. Jade gave a toast that had me laughing and sobbing within the same minute. To Emily, she said, raising her glass, who spent her whole life waiting for the people around her to realize how amazing she is. Until one day, she realized it herself. The crowd cheered. I cried again. And through all of it, through the glow of string lights, the warmth of Tyler's hand in mine, the music, the clinking of glasses, I never once looked at my phone. I knew the messages were there. I knew Rachel had posted some vague, passive-aggressive status online about sisters who choose ego over family. I knew Mike had probably texted something snarky. I was sure my mom had called, maybe even left another voice message laced with guilt. But none of it mattered, because they weren't there. And for once, finally, that was a blessing, not a loss. They weren't there to ruin it. They weren't there to make it about them. They weren't there to remind me of what I used to ache for. They were just gone. And in their absence, I found something far more powerful than any apology they could have given. Peace, freedom, joy. My wedding wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point or getting even. It was about reclaiming something that was stolen from me over and over again, the chance to belong on my own terms. And that night, as Tyler and I lay side by side under a sky full of stars, our hands tangled, his breath warm against my shoulder, I whispered, "Thank you," he smiled. "For what?" "For seeing me, for loving me the way I always needed to be loved." He pulled me closer. "I didn't just see you," he said. "I chose you, and that made all the difference. You'd think after the wedding it would finally be over, that they'd get the message and let go. But no, the silence didn't last. 3 days after we returned from a short mountain getaway, not a full honeymoon, just a little escape, I came home to a storm of messages, missed calls, and a familiar cold in my stomach. Mike had left a voicemail. I debated deleting it without listening, but something made me press play. His voice was tight, angry. "You really think you're the victim here, huh? That we were just these heartless monsters who excluded you for fun? Grow up, Emily. You chose to humiliate this family. You made us look like strangers at your wedding. Congratulations, click." That was it. Not a single word of apology. No ownership, just projection, just venom. The irony that I'd finally had a joyful day. And that was what offended them. I scrolled through my texts. Rachel had sent a novel, a full wall of emotional guilt tripping. "I hope you're happy. You broke this family apart. Everyone's talking about it. You could have handled things like an adult. You could have invited us and had a conversation like grown-ups. Instead, you blindsided us. You made a public statement that we were never good enough for you. That hurts, Emily." I didn't respond. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I'd said it all before. Years of trying to get through to them, begging to be seen. And every time, they'd made it about me being dramatic, too sensitive, overreacting. Now that the roles had flipped, suddenly they were the wounded ones, the victims, the abandoned. I turned my phone off and went to sit on the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the wind move through the trees. Tyler came out behind me and draped a blanket over my shoulders. "More drama?" he asked. I nodded. "They're furious. They think I embarrassed them." He raised an eyebrow. "By getting married without inviting people who excluded you from your whole life?" I let out a short laugh. It was bitter, but honest. "Yeah, that's apparently the greatest betrayal of all." He sat beside me, pulling me close. "You did the right thing, Em. You protected your peace. That's not betrayal, that's survival." And he was right, but the fallout kept trickling in, like rain that wouldn't stop. My mom finally emailed me. She'd moved past the emotional pleas. Now, she was formal. "We're extremely disappointed. We still don't understand how you could shut your entire family out of the most important day of your life. We expected better. We raised you better." That line, "we raised you better," hit me harder than I wanted to admit, because part of me still wanted my mother's approval, even after all the silence, the excuses, the loyalty to everyone but me. There was still a small ache, the child inside me, still wanting her to say, "You were right to be hurt. I should have done more." But she never would, because to do that, she'd have to admit she failed me, and she couldn't do that. It would unravel too much. So instead, she doubled down. I drafted a reply, a long, careful one, not angry, just honest. I reread it 10 times, and then I deleted it, because they weren't reading, not really. They were defending their version of the story, where I was the ungrateful one, the rebellious one, the cold-hearted sister who tore everything apart. And in their minds, that version was easier to live with. Even Josh messaged me. "I know you think we all abandoned you, but you never really tried to stay close either. You distanced yourself for years. I stared at those words for a long time. The audacity. The way he twisted years of silence and exclusion into my failure to stay close. Like I hadn't begged. Like I hadn't tried. Like I hadn't stood outside their lives with my nose pressed against the glass, waiting for someone to open the door. Tyler found me crying in the kitchen that night. "Hey," he said, gently taking the phone from my hand. "Stop letting them in." "I don't know how," I whispered. He held me for a long time, and then he said something that stayed with me. "You don't owe your pain a home just because it shares your last name." That was the moment I knew I had to let go for good. I blocked the numbers, archived the emails, unfollowed the family group chat I was never really a part of anyway, and I focused on the life I was building, not the one I had been shut out of. After the messages stopped, or rather, after I finally stopped looking, I started to notice something else. Stillness. Space. Not the kind that echoes with loneliness, but the kind that lets you breathe. For so long, my life had been built around one hope, that they would come around. That one day my siblings would realize what they'd done. That my mother would sit me down, look me in the eye, and say, "I see you now. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you." But that day never came. And when I finally let go of that fantasy, I realized something liberating. I didn't need them to build a life. I could build my own. And I already was. Our friends became our family. Jade came over every Thursday for dinner, sometimes with her girlfriend, sometimes alone, always with a bottle of wine, and the kind of stories that make your sides hurt from laughing. Tyler's parents, Donna and Greg, called me our girl, and treated me with the kind of gentleness that made my heart ache with gratitude. Donna even started teaching me how to knit, like it was some unspoken rite of passage. We hosted game nights, cooked too much food, laughed until we cried. We built something real, one brick at a time, and on the days when the silence from my blood family felt too heavy, I let myself feel it, fully. I didn't pretend it didn't sting. I didn't lie to myself and say, "It doesn't matter." It did matter. It always had. But that grief, it didn't get to steer my life anymore. It was a passenger now, silent, strapped in, no longer reaching for the wheel. One night, a few months after the wedding, Tyler and I sat on the porch watching fireflies drift over the backyard. We weren't talking, just sitting, existing, breathing in the peace we'd made. He turned to me suddenly and said, "You know, I think the best thing you ever did was stop waiting for them." I nodded slowly. "Yeah," I said, because once I stopped, I realized how many people were waiting, just waiting for me to notice them. And I had. Jade, Donna, and Greg. Even our neighbors who dropped off baked goods after the wedding, saying, "We saw the pictures online. You two look so happy." They noticed. They showed up. That mattered. That was family. Not the ones who shared your DNA, but the ones who shared your joy, your pain, your Tuesday leftovers and your bad days and your little triumphs. The ones who knew your story and stayed anyway. So, no, my siblings didn't show up for me. Not when I was a child desperate to feel included. Not when I became a young woman finally setting boundaries. Not even when I said, "This is where the line is. You don't get to keep hurting me." But I did something they never did. I built a space that was open. I built a life that didn't require anyone to earn forgiveness. Just to show up with love, with honesty, with presence. And the people who came, they're not just guests in my story. They are my story now.